with Ingrid Jensen today, one of my favorite people and favorite trumpet players in the world. And so we're going to have a good time and talk about a lot of different stuff. I guess the first question, and there's a trumpet, so that might come out in a little bit, which would be
Who knows?
great. And Ingrid, I just want to talk a little bit about your youth because that's always a great place to start, obviously, where people came from. So you're from Vancouver originally, right?
Yes, Vancouver Island, actually.
And so,
The beautiful shot of the view I grew up with. Not
can,
directly. We were up the hill from
and so I'm sure you have a lot of family and friends there. So I guess the first question is there room for all of us?
that. Well, the house is gone. But we can go camp on the beach.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit about your beginnings. I know your mother was a pianist, and of course your sisters are also musical. And can you kind of talk about your childhood a little bit of that and how you started?
Yeah, I've been talking about this a little bit lately because I've been doing some interviews for things, and it's fun to kind of stir up old memories of my youth in relation to how I came to the trumpet. And it was more that it was kind of induced into my womb before I was even born. My mom was the real Louis Armstrong fan, and she had all the like the hot fives and hot sevens, all these early high quality Louis Armstrong recordings, and combined with her classical technology
Mm-hmm.
or technology, classical technique. Hi, Spencer. She just came on. She had these chops. She had huge hands. We have big hands in the Jensen family. I think mine are like medium
Yeah.
compared to my mom. Mom had bear paws, and she could easily get a tenth, easily. Octave was like whatever, but she had like these meaty hands, and maybe it's our prairie roots from Canada, but between her playing stride and then also Chopin and Debussy and her Rachmaninoff and whatever else she was working on. She didn't play very much Mozart or Beethoven, but she was really into the poetic sounding music. And she also was into standards. She had all the original lead sheets. Like they were, the ones that say 10
Right.
cents, 5 cents, 4 cents, 20 cents.
Right.
The cool pictures on them with the verses.
Right.
So, I mean, I really got quite a nice, innocent introduction to the canon through the original versions of a lot of the tunes that I still play nowadays in more of a jazz advanced reharmonization concept, or even in with the more modern harmonic approach. So my ear was trained early on to hear melodies and to hear swing. My body felt swing from a very young age, and yeah, it was just a house filled with swinging Oscar Peterson records. And sorry, I have to keep the door open, everybody.
I know that's okay. That's all right.
But Donnie behave. And yeah, it was a house of music, and that was my beginnings. Was being inside this house when it was raining, and then being outside in nature with all those when it wasn't raining. Actually, when it was raining too, it went out.
Yeah.
It rains all the time on the West Coast, and being out in nature with those sounds of other cultures, like really far and distant cultures in many ways. Like Oscar Peterson was from Jamaica, I think. Jamaican roots. I should know this. It's not Haitian, it's Jamaican.
Right.
And so that background of that music from Africa made it into our little British Columbia living room in the most kind of just like normal, what I thought was normal. That was our normal listening environment in these ways that were just once I picked up the trumpet, it didn't really matter what instrument I played at that point, even though I was hearing Louis for sure. And I was hearing the sound of a trumpet, not that I chose it, but I was hearing the sound of this style of music. It was pretty organic from point zero, -1, negative born to, fast forward to grade school band, 7th, 8th, 9th grade band, and having an instant affinity to not just understanding music from the way rhythm and harmony and melody work out together, but also the improvisation part of it was instilled in me.
Yeah. And how old were you when you started to play? About 12, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I think 12 or 13. And I picked up the horn And because, as some people might know, I'm left-handed, and I picked it up and went, and it was so easy. And I had a saxophone teacher who was, saxophone player was our teacher, and he didn't even know. He didn't pick up on it. He was like, 6 months later, I think your hand goes the other way. I think it's this hand that plays the buttons. And I was like, oh. And then the so-called fun began.
Right, right. I've had people tell me before to, like, when you have a tricky lick, to learn it with the opposite hand.
Yeah,
You know.
I can remember sitting on the couch in our basement watching Gilligan's Island, doing John McNeil's finger study patterns for left hand and right hand, because he put in his early book. I don't know if he put in his later books, but he said, do it with your left hand, and then do it with your right hand, see what happens. And I was like, well, since I'm left-handed, nothing, if that left one will be easy. And that actually did make my right hand much more flexible and much more, it organized the pathways from my brain.
Are you purely left-handed with everything, like athletics and everything like that? Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I can hold it with my right hand, but it feels awkward in my brain. It sends my body and my brain a different message to, like, do gimpy things. Like, there's a lot of pictures of me from the past, which I could go back and correct my posture in, because there was so much lack of alignment going on, and that directly fed the frustration, I think, in the way I was trying to play, trying to access these very free-flowing ideas, and in the meantime, my so-called free-flowing concept was interrupted by a body that was completely, like, off axis.
I wish I could say I can't relate to that, but completely can't. Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so and talk about your sisters a little bit too. So Christine is obviously partners with you quite a bit on saxophone.
Yeah, not so much these days. She's locked up in Canada. We're locked up below the border. So that's really put a kibosh on our relationship as far as playing together, because she was the one person who I was just rely on to just throw things together, and it would always work, and we'd just take off and do things. So in the way things are now, it's, unless we want to do an online project, it's a little limited. So our kids play Roblox. They play tag on Roblox together instead.
What's the age difference between you and your younger sister?
Yeah, we're a little, like, 4 years apart, so it's a bit of a distance.
Yeah, but
and when we grew up, it was it was like I took off to Berkeley before she was even out of high school.
Right. But she was already playing though when you were in high school, and
yeah, she was playing alto and piano, and she was really good at both, but she hadn't really committed to either one per se. Yeah. When she got to McGill, she really got serious about alto and sort of put the piano to the side as far as performing goes. But she gigged on both.
That's great. And so speaking of that, so your education kind of continued. You went to Berkeley. Can you kind of talk about your time there? I mean, what that period of your life was like as far as your growth?
Well, before I went to Berkeley, I went to a community college. And I think I tell a lot of young people who listen to those of us who are older and make it seem so easy in some ways, because it comes so naturally to us, especially when it comes to improvising and creating on the spot, that this music takes a long time to get good at. You don't just excel to mastery within the first few years of college or university. And so going to Berkeley, had I gone there straight out of high school, I think I would have just it would have eaten me up and spit me out. So having those 2 years of just, seriously, like, we're talking local community college, just like the show, community college, community, I think it's called. I mean, you take whatever you wanted, I took some literature classes and just screwed around and, skipped classes, could get away with it because I needed to. My mentality was just like, I just want to go for a walk. I don't want to go to biology or something. Yeah. And I could afford to do it. Not that I'm telling people to be irresponsible with their education, but I kind of am. It's like, to have that opportunity to mess up and be okay with it in a
Yeah.
strange time. I think we're in that time again, where because there's all this technology at hand, you can actually revisit a class if you really mentally are not up to taking in that information. You're burnt out. I may actually encourage some of my students to go, you know what, you need to go sleep because this schedule is nuts. Take a break, come back, revisit the class, and when you're ready to really take in the information.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today when things were moving so fast and now they've stopped. That's sort of like what it was like going to Malaspina College up on a hill looking over the Georgia Strait and just having no worries because it was just that time living at home with my parents and just
Yeah.
practicing when I wanted to. But also what happened, Mark, during that time was I practiced things that had a huge impact on me. There was this opera teacher there who I'd listened to her teach lessons, and eventually I just knocked on her door. I said, "Can you just show me how to breathe? How do you breathe? How do you do that?" And we just stood in the hall. She would give me these exercises, and I'd take my horn and stare at the clock and try and hold a note for as many cycles of that second hand going around as I could, and try these things that she told me. And so I think back on those times, and it was like maybe I didn't shed as much as I should have, but I certainly had a clarity about myself that I could focus on the things that really needed to be taken care of.
Right. Well, we don't really try to learn things until we're ready to learn them, I guess, is the way that generally works, right? A lot of the time.
And everybody learns at their own, and should be encouraged to learn at their own pace. And that's another part of having a 9-year-old daughter in the public school too. I'm just like really reflecting what many parents are after this shutdown of how best to go about educating without over-educating or over-schooling. There's a book, I just had it over here, called Unschooling. Shh, don't tell anybody.
Well, and actually, but before we get too far into the things at Berkeley, could you talk about the jazz you were working on when you were in high school? I mean, what, as far as playing, were you transcribing? Were you just playing by ear? What was your structure like then?
I think I was finding a balance between the oral tradition that I grew up with, because I played a lot with records when I was young. I just had the record player on and I just played. And I just picked away, fishing for fingers, as Clark Terry said. Just finding the right notes that went in the right place at the right time. And then, when I came out to starting to read and put B flat together, I think because I grew up playing piano, I had a little bit of an issue with the whole transposition thing. And now that I just think in concert for the most part, especially when I'm playing jazz, I don't use B flat parts. It's relaxed my hearing capacity in many ways.
Now, other than the Louis Armstrong records, when you were growing up, what were other things that you were listening to? Were you checking out Miles when you were young and Clifford Brown?
I had the original pressing of Kind of Blue, and I was playing with that, and it was out of tune. I was like, what's the matter with me? I can't play a tune, because it was recorded at the wrong bit rate. But all those records, Miles, Chet Baker was a big one, because I didn't have any technique, a terrible technique, so I could access his register and play his songs and his solos. Not that Chet didn't have great technique,
but it wasn't Clifford Brown.
It wasn't like Clifford Brown, exactly, or Lee Morgan or Freddie Hubbard. I tried lifting some Coltrane solos too soon in my career. That kind of messed me up, and I was like, let me actually go to some Lee Morgan now that I'm getting a little bit of pop in my sound. So not pop music, but pop, like some sizzle happening, and that really helped. And as well, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the singers that I grew up listening to. So all the time, the lyric was in my head.
Right.
And learning these tunes, whether it was an original or not, I still had this capacity of translating the phrase from like B to A to slowly, even if it was a song that didn't have lyrics yet. I had this poetic side to me. I like literature a lot. I was reading a lot. My mom was an English teacher. That the lyric became very important in me learning how to play these songs with at the time, adequate phrasing, not amazing, but I think it did instill in me a sense of story.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a story in music, and especially I think in the lineage of this Black American music, as we're all learning more and more, the story is it's deep.
Yes. Well,
Nothing to be just read out of the real book like the real book looks.
right. Well, and also if you're learning the lyrics, I mean, that's keeping your brain in the music as opposed to trying to figure out how to play the trumpet while you're doing it at the same time, I would think,
It's
right?
also giving you license because a lot of those songs are sung by many different singers of different character. It gives you license and also the tools to start to realize, oh wow, each time this song is sung or played, it can be phrased differently. Listen to how Ella does it versus Shirley Horn. It's huge.
Right. Which
Very,
singers were you listening to when you were in high school?
I mean, I went through a lot of phases of, not just jazz, ska and R&B and funk and heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be where my distortion obsession
Right.
comes in once in a while.
Yes.
Not enough blues. We didn't really have, aside from the Louis Armstrong contribution to the blues, and Oscar Peterson as well. But I mean, really like original, traditional, not traditional, but Mississippi blues.
Right.
Once I got into that later in life, I realized I was missing a whole connect the dots in this in this big language, this beautiful sea of intricate language that has come from afar. And even now, this morning I was listening to that 1619 project on the podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I cry every time I listen to it. And they're playing this music, the origin of music in America. And it's, the storyline is so incredible.
Yeah.
And I thank my beginnings as being really obsessed with words. I was in poetry competitions when I was young. It sounds weird. It's like a jazz competition. It doesn't make any sense. Read this poem. And I was in I think my mom put me in. I was kind of insecure and really shy when I was super young, and so she had me in these, state poetry readings, and I really got into it. And I think even for this small period of my growth in elementary school, when I did that, when it came time to embrace a language that had no words, as playing an instrument,
Mm-hmm.
that it helped me to kind of dig into some vibe or mood or meaning,
Right.
that could be translated through whatever song I started to play. So my ear, to answer your question full circle,
Yeah.
my ear was always hugely involved, but because my technique was at such a disparity, it was this constant battle to figure out what to even practice sometimes.
What were you taking lessons, just like trumpet lessons with anybody in high school, or was
The band teacher I had was a trumpet player, drummer kind of guy. He was sort of a jack of all trades. He was a decent trumpet player, but he was teaching band. He was busy. And so I went to Vancouver Island. To Vancouver mainland. Took the boat over and took lessons with this great guy, Al Matheson. Wonderful, real traditional.
Oh yeah.
I
do. Yeah.
Incredible musician.
Yeah.
And so he started with those few lessons I was able to get. It took me all day to get there.
Right.
3 hours to get there and do a lesson, and then 3 hours to get back.
Were you playing like Clark and Arbin and the normal stuff with him? And
yeah, he got me into Clark, and he also was really into Vic Spiderbeck. So that was a really great way to play some music that was really challenging for me, but also put me into a more of a trad mindset of playing things accurately. Whereas up to that point, I just making stuff up.
Gotcha. Yeah, Al was wrote a thing for one of the Chickowitz books we did.
Oh.
He stayed with Mr. Chickowitz. So yeah, so that's very cool. I didn't realize that was the case. But yeah, I know he's a big teacher up in Vancouver. So that's terrific.
He really gave me my early beginnings as far as getting the concept of the trumpet together. But I think I had a lot of issues that were maybe outside of most people's wheelhouse until I got with Lori later on in life, and a lot of it started to fall into place. It was probably partly my own resistance, but it definitely had a lot to do with my posture and the way I was playing. I look back at pictures of me playing, I'm like, did any sound even come out of my body? I just discovered something from high school, and there's this picture of me, and it's just, I mean, it's a video, actually. It's really great, which I would share it, but I'll put it on my website, and it's just a short clip of me in high school. And I thought I sucked back then. I was like, oh, I'm not playing anything. Ugh, it's awful. Everything I'm playing sucks. And then I recently discovered, I was like, it's kind of killing. Who's that? Wow, there's like some pentatonic force and Clark Terry licks, and much more was coming out of the horn than I thought. So despite it all,
when you were in high school and you were listening to all these people, did you find yourself like listening to a bunch of different people at once, or did you kind of get into a zone where you're like, I'm way into Clifford Brown right now, I'm way into Clark Terry right now? Were you trying to emulate them in that way, or was it more of like just a thing?
I would.
Come as it may.
Easy one to answer. I would emulate them till I found out that I couldn't play what they were playing, and then I'd quit and move to the next guy. It's like, wow, this is really cool. Oh, man. Okay, who else can I play with that isn't going to make me want to quit?
Right.
And then I eventually realized you just take their ideas down the octave, and that'll work. So until I got my range together, I did that a lot. I would play with solos and then figure out other parts of the solo that were out of my register and make it work.
I remember thinking that about like Clifford Brown's Sandu solo, like, oh, I can play this, and then after that, it was just a disaster, and I thought I should play less notes. So, so you were at Berkeley, and do you want to talk about a little more about? I kind of got us off track a little bit, but what was your phase of practice like once you got past community college and into Berkeley? What was the next step for you?
Well, I finished community college and I went to a really important jazz camp that was a pivotal moment. And to not mention that one is kind of to miss a link in my process of how I was encouraged by a lot of older men in jazz to do what I do.
Where was that?
It was a camp. That was a Port Townsend workshop where I eventually ended up not only meeting my husband, but also conceiving of our child. All, we're talking about a magical place. If you've seen it, that place is charged with love. So it was this camp, and I went there with just some friends from Vancouver. A friend of mine from Vancouver, we took the bus down, and we had scholarship, and showed up, and we were like the Canadian cats, and I was like pretty nervous. All of these musicians were playing so well, and Tom Harrell was there, and Bobby Shue, and the whole Phil Woods quintet was there, Claude Brookmeyer. It was heavy. It was like this really heavy. And then, of course, Bud Shank, the great late Bud Shank. If you haven't checked him out, his playing was extraordinary. Oh. And so I was at this camp and playing a tune, and the whole Phil Woods quintet walked in, and they were like listening to me play. I played rhythm changes for the first time. I hadn't really played rhythm changes. I was like, what's rhythm changes? I should probably practice this one. This seems like something they play, these jazz people. And they're like, yeah. And I closed my eyes and I opened them up again. They were all standing there, and they're like. Then Hal Galpert grabbed me afterwards, and he kind of mentored me for the next 10 years. And it was his idea. He's like, you should probably go east, young lady.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was in July, and by August I was in Boston.
Now, where was Galper living in New York at that point?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So, but you saw him, you said, over the next 10 years, like just kind of semi-often, or?
Well, I ended up, let's see, I went to Berkeley for 3 years. I think I saw him at a workshop once there. But he had given me a package of stuff to practice, right? Kind of stuff you practice that takes years to practice. All his forward motion brilliance. And, to me, that's very much more saxophonistic approach to playing trumpet.
Yeah.
That because I had limited technique, it took me the curve of really digging into it was a little distorted, and eventually it just once I got more chops later on in life, it made much more sense, and it was much more applicable to having this flow in my whole overall circuit board. But at the time, I went to Berkeley and met him. I also would run into him after I finished Berkeley. I moved to Europe, saw him in Vienna quite a few times when I was living there, and would just have these extensive lessons and kick my butt.
Yeah.
Some in Boston, quite a few. I remember seeing him in Boston. In fact, one memorable moment, he said, I came to see him at the Scholars, and I was like, I don't know, Hal. I don't think I'm good enough to be a jazz trumpet player. He goes, what are you talking about? Stop talking. It's already chosen you. Just go shed. Or something like that. What are you talking about? The music already chose you ages ago. Shut up. Go practice.
Wow.
And I was like, later in life, I was like, thank you for that moment.
Yeah. Right. Well, and some other people, I mean, before we get to talking about Lori, because I know we'll get into that quite a bit, some other people were mentors to you in a way too. Clark Terry, I've heard
Yeah.
you say he's a big mentor, right? Can you talk about that and how like?
Clark, you guys want to see the picture? Can you see it? It's all the way over there.
Oh yeah, in the corner there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible when you go from idolizing somebody when you're young and in high school, and then they actually wind up being a mentor and a friend to you a little later. Can you kind of talk about how that kind of transpired?
That was also due to my daring, bold moves that I made spontaneously because I didn't really have a life plan. You know? My parents definitely didn't go, all right, you're going to do this and then this and then this. Because I would be like, I don't think so. And you know I'm going to say that, so don't bother wasting your breath. So I did what I could do to get through Berkeley. And I think by my last year, I had like 2 jobs and was gigging, I had work study and had some grants from Canada just to get through the tuition and all the costs of being there. And when I finished, I was like, where should I go? I think I'll go to Denmark. I have family there. My aunt said I could live with her.
Yeah.
So I had some money saved and I just jumped on a plane with what little I had and moved to Denmark and was there for like 3 months. And I had just shedded and I had this couple of boxes of cassettes, a cassette player and some headphones. And I went to town, did all the stuff I didn't have time to do when I was at school.
Right.
And really focused, which it's full circle to this time here too. I'm seeing a lot of my students finding time to really dig into things that they didn't have time to dig into before because of all this compacted home time. And yeah, so I just transcribed and shed, and then I went out and sat in at clubs, and one night I was at a club and somebody's like, you should go to Steve's Records and hang out because there's always musicians hanging out there. So it was this cool little record store. If you've ever been to I know you've been to Copenhagen, but
yeah, no, I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Oh my gosh.
No, I would love to go.
No, they're already there. They're already without masks.
I know.
Of course, you may not be allowed in there, coming from here. Eventually, it'll all be over.
Eventually, someday.
But just to rub in how beautiful it was, it was like this pristine lifestyle. I was being fed by my aunt, so these fatty Danish foods during the for free every day, and then I would just go out on my bike and with my horn and sit in at clubs or hang out with Ernie Wilkins. Yeah, Ernie Wilkins, the guy who wrote for Joe Williams and for the bass band, who was Clark Terry's best friend. So Ernie and I would hang out at this record store a whole bunch, like probably I was there like 2 or 3 times a week with him. And then I went to his house for dinner, and we hung out. One night Clark called, he introduced me to Clark, and I was like, yeah, Mr. Terry, it's so great to meet you. I actually was supposed to play with you at Berkeley, but they took me off the gig and put this guy named Roy Hargrove on the gig.
Oh, gosh.
and I was like, they put me in the jazz rock ensemble, and I played a solo and cried, and then went home and cried some more. But that was, that was life. That's life in the world of the way things go sometimes. And so long story short, it took me a lot longer to meet him than I was hoping. I had seen him when I was a kid play, and I got an autograph and all that good stuff. Yeah. But to really have the chance to, be in his presence was one of my main goals.
Right.
And so Ernie was like, he was my ticket to Clark's friendship because his daughter, Ernie's daughter was Clark's goddaughter. And by the time I finally left Copenhagen and moved to New York, she was also living there, and we were still really in good contact. And so she just dragged me down to the club one night. She goes, Ingrid, we're going to the Vanguard. Put on some clothes. Saturday night, you're going to go sit in with Clark. Bring your horn. And I was like, yeah, right. And so she dragged me down there, and she just took me up to Clark on a break and said, Ernie says you're supposed to let Ingrid play. and kind of, that really is one of those, like, the rest is history.
Right, right,
because,
right.
because Clark, I was so nervous, I thought I was going to die. So I had a choice between dying of complete and total anxiety, panic attack, or finding air and playing in a melatonin, and kind of playing okay on it. And after that, he's like, "You're staying up playing another tune, girl." And then after that, he was like, "What's your number? Where are you living?" And then I moved to Austria, and he was like, called me up, "What's your address?" And he wrote me letters, and we hung
Wow.
out all the time, and so he would make me sit in everywhere. And when I was living in Austria, this is when I was teaching. I got a teaching gig there at the Brokener Conservatory in the jazz area for a couple of years, which was great. This is after this time of hanging out in New York for a year.
Yeah.
And it was a tough year too. It was like when the economy was in the total tank and people were really suffering. So I took this opportunity to make money and just shed some more and get to know Europe. And thanks to Clark, he was just like, "Wherever I am, you better show up, girl. Bring your horn." And I sat in Austria and in Munich, maybe in Germany. Yeah, Germany, Munich, Germany. Go. And then there was a manager that took my name and was the manager of the Golden Men of Jazz. That's who he was touring with one time when I sat in. And he said, "Yeah, we're going to get you a record deal."
Wow.
And he did.
And he did. And so which label was that?
That was Enja Records.
Okay. Okay.
He sent out my cassette to about 10 labels, but just before he was sending them out, I pissed him off, and I was like, "Oh, by the way, you can't tell them I'm a woman because they'll listen to it differently." And he was like, "Oh, that's going to make it a lot harder." And I said, "Well, then don't bother."
Wow.
And so thankfully, the one label that I actually wanted to be on, which was Enja, Matthias heard something he liked in my playing and took it from there.
You took it from there. Well, so you just kind of spoke of another issue. I mean, obviously, there's not a ton of women jazz trumpet players, especially not at that time. Can you talk about some of the roadblocks that you probably had to overcome that some of your male counterparts didn't have to deal with?
I mean, honestly, Mark, coming out of college, out of university, I saw a lot of my friends already had been scooped up by so many bands. And I realized, even when I was coming out of Berkeley, I was like, this isn't going to happen for me. I'm not going to get asked to go play with Art Blakey. I'm not going to ask to, it doesn't matter how good I play. There's nobody going to ask me to go play a gig with them.
Right.
It wasn't like a huge revelation, like, "Oh man, I'm so screwed." It was more like, "Well, I'm actually not really ready. I think I'd freak out." And I don't think I technically either have that endurance to do a real gig. I hadn't had a proper trumpet teacher. I mean, Berkeley was great. The teachers were awesome, but there was nobody. I failed in going down the street to study with, is it Charlie Schluter? And who else was there?
Schluter would have been there, and Tim Morrison, and maybe, I don't know if Tom
Some
Ralston.
famous teacher.
Roger
Right?
Voisin.
Yeah. Had I had a little more, awareness, I think I probably would have tried to get a lesson from one of them, but I didn't. And so I just was like hacking through my way of playing until I really got to New York and got with Lori and had a real comprehensive.
Yeah. So when was this when you first started working with Lori?
That was the first time I moved to New York.
Okay.
I lived in New York. It took me two moves to make it, because the first move was very, like I said, it was a really tough time. I had a day job. I worked at the Waldorf Astoria as an audiovisual technician, so I could have my visa and also make money.
Okay.
And, yeah, talk about seeing how the bowels of America function. But it was great, man. I saw it. I saw how the dirty rich live and treat other people, and it was pretty disgusting.
Well,
But it was also $14 an hour in 1990, right?
Yeah.
$14 an hour plus overtime. So with that money, I was able to afford to live in the East Village with some friends from Berkeley. They let me kind of crash in their place because they were always all on the road. So I'd just go from room to room or sleep on the couch. And in the meantime, I was playing on the weekends, and then I took lessons with Lori. I was playing in a band. You had asked about other women. Rebecca Franks, great trumpet player. She was in this band. We're playing in a club date band. And she, in a cab one night, she's like, you got to call Lori. Here's her number.
Yeah.
You should call Lori. And I was like, who's Lori?
Yeah.
So, the rest, that's another one. The rest is history, because I had the opportunity post college to actually focus on exactly what she told me to do without anything in the way, rather than, aside from playing in the subway and on the street on the weekends for 4 hours at a time.
What was the first, you said you were talking about all the technical issues you had. What was the first lesson like? What do you remember from that?
I remember being super nervous and super intimidated, because I felt like there was a lot of, in my sound at the time, there was this real unevenness. And it was making everything really kind of shaky. It wasn't so much that I was nervous. It was like an anxiety in my ear. If I look back on those times, I was like, why am I so freaking freaked out? And it was because my brain was so active, going, well, is that the third? Should I be playing a G? Am I sharp? Am I flat? Oh, I don't know if I like that sound. And then she's like, here, subdivide, go. And I was like, what? Now do this exercise while you subdivide. I'm like, what? Huh?
And this was Caruso she was talking about.
And then it clicked. Was that?
And was this Caruso she was showing you right then?
Yeah. And really simple stuff, just 6 notes.
Yeah.
I couldn't free buzz very well. I couldn't really get a very good sound on my mouthpiece, but I could at least play those 6 notes in a row. And I still do them. To this day, I do them in various orders from various places in my sonic space. I let my body tell me what the first note should be now, versus, always a concert F.
Yeah.
So since all that training that she gave me, that was so, so rooted in fundamental truths.
Yeah.
The physics of the instrument, the physics of the body, the focus of the brain that relates to the air. I mean, all these things that just calm me down enough that I could actually start to get a bigger and a more even sound. And suddenly my register and my range and my endurance were like insane. I had a double G in like a month.
Wow.
I went from barely getting to a C in the staff to a double G. And it was nothing that she changed here. It was just, she made me be still. She taught me to be still. She taught me how to be still on my own and have an even stream of air. And within that even stream of air, all these things I'd always been hearing and wanting to go for could finally align.
Yeah.
They were out of sync before. Everything was out of sync. It was like, wow, it's amazing that I could play as well as I played. Fortunately, I was relying on my ear so much that influenced the air without me getting in the way of it.
Right. Do you still use her Flexus book? Is that something you still?
Sometimes I visit it, but I didn't come up during that book time. I came up earlier. I have notes, old notes. I mean, everything's in my brain as far as what she taught me, and I have to find my original cassettes and transcribe them. I have them.
She was very calming. I went to see her when I had some injuries too, and only got to see her once before she passed away. But she definitely had a very calming, it's going to be okay kind of approach that made you feel like, well, I guess it will be. So
she was right. It's only our own brains that make things so. I mean, and more than that, there's trauma. Trauma's real, but to really to get into those places of anxiety, if there's nothing major in the way, it's not that much work.
Yeah.
It's just, and I want to say something also that I think it relates to this time we're in right now, is that that when we're being forced to slow down, we can actually take more time to experience that calmness. Like really meditate for half an hour and then just play 2 notes and see what they are in relation to a drone or in relation to a metronome pulse.
Yeah.
And then just observe, like, oh, what's happening with my body? Why did I do this? Or everything stayed here. My shoulders stayed back and down. My body's breathing without me telling it to.
Right. Okay, and that's another thing I was going to talk to you about, because I know you're really big into the drone practice, and not just like practicing. I mean, you improvise off the drone a lot when you practice, right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's an improv tool at this point. It is, the root is the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th, the sharp 11, the 13, etc. It's
Yeah.
all the extensions. It's also a fundamental sound that also creates other sounds over top of it and below it, above and below, depending on how in tune I am.
Right. And yeah, you play very in tune. I mean, you really do. And I've seen you do classes before and talk about this where you're really very aware of the distance between the notes and the intervals and being in tune and all the other benefits that come with that, like you just said, all the resultant tones and all the other colors you get out of that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you do that? Because I think when most people practice with a drone, they're either using it for the root or the fifth. And I think you more than anybody I've ever seen talk about all the other extensions you can do from the drone and where you take it.
Well, I even at this point, Mark, it's about um, whatever my most honest note is that I'm beginning within my body.
Mm-hmm.
That should be kind of where I'm going to start my ideas from, as far as when it's time to start playing the chunk of metal. Like this part of it at the end is really, it's the buttons are the
Yeah.
end result. It's really like, what is my fundamental note? Without trying, and then what's that gonna do? What is that interval? What's this gonna do? I don't know. Ooh, interesting. So already I have 3 tonal centers there to play with. I just actually wrote a tune off of four heard tonal centers that I didn't try to get.
Yeah.
They didn't try. I was like, oh, let's find 4. Now let's go. And so yeah. So as far as how that drone would work is in pre-COVID times, it was definitely more focused towards the music I was learning to go play live.
Right.
Right. I want to sound good on stuff, and now it's about that as well. I was recording this weekend, so I went through a Kenny Wheeler tune, My Old Man, and went through all the key centers of each of the 8-bar phrases and really made sure I was hearing the function of the chords against those key centers. Right? The first one was C, the second one was A flat. So all these different relationships of roots to the home key, which I think we forget sometimes too, is to like, even with an etude, I'll do it with the conconing. I'll look at one of those, go, oh man, this is in D minor. Let me do the whole thing with a D drone after I've done my 6 notes and some flexibility stuff that, taking from Lori and Adam Rappa and whatever else. Now I feel like I'm collected here. Now let me play this whole thing. Now let me turn the drone off and see if I can play it from the beginning to the end without any mistakes. To me, the mistakes are when I haven't really sussed out what I'm not hearing.
Right. Right. Yeah. So that's yeah, I think that's very cool. I mean, I've always heard you talk about, well, maybe this is the 7th, what the drone is on, and you're working from that pitch versus it just being the tonic and those kind of things.
Yeah, it can relate to anything. That note can be anything. And it can also, my note can be a quarter tone off from it. It doesn't have to be a half step. It could be actually, we can get into a whole Jacob Collier way of hearing and finding all these other possibilities that take us beyond just the 12 notes. But I think a very good place for, especially young players to start is like roots and fifths.
Right. Right. For sure.
And major, minor, diminished, augmented triads. Because through all of those, you can do all of those over one note and one key center and really find a lot of areas of repair that have been inhibiting whatever it is you're trying to play.
Yeah, because especially right now when people are not playing with each other very much. You know?
Totally.
Yeah, it's really, you really kind of have to do it,
Yeah. And it is a stress reliever. I'm going to say that. It really is. People are like, oh, what's the new age thing you're doing up there? And I was like, I'm actually relaxing while I'm practicing. I'm relaxing. Oh, look at that. A double C just popped out. Wonder why. Oh, because I wasn't stressing to get it.
Right.
Add some subdivision to that, and you're playing. You're imagining the song you're playing.
Right. Exactly. Well, so how long would you say you worked with Lori on and off?
I had two sessions, 2 major chunks of my development. One was when I was in New York in the 90s, early 90s, I guess 99, and it was in 1990. And I didn't have any real issues then. I had a very bad tendonitis, though. Like what I thought was tendonitis. It was actually, because I used to ride horses, I had fallen off and jammed my arm when I was young, and it was never set properly. So I had this horrible, and I've done a lot of study. I don't know how much time we have here, but
Oh, we got as much time as you want.
I've done a lot of brain and body study recently through different therapy, brain therapy um, programs, and working with this one guy in particular. But back then, I think what happened was not only the anxiety and the stress of trying to do what I had been doing up until that point in my career, which was so absurd in so many ways and not supported as much as probably could have been, but whatever. I'm here now.
Yeah.
Um, but the physical injury itself became, the pain in here was not just here, it was all in my brain as well, and there was this constant feed of unhappiness and misery going on for years and years, right? Like I went to Berkeley and I took music copying because we didn't do it. I'm that old. We didn't have computers. We did it by hand, and I'm left-handed, so it would make it worse. It would exacerbate this injury. And I was writing for big band, and I was writing smaller charts, and I was like, oh, poor me. But at the same time, what I learned once I moved to New York during this huge healing time in my life, because I had Lori, Lori Schiff, who she sent me to the second time, actually, to do Alexander technique. But in this first period, I had Lori, and then I also got this Chinese master healer. He's like one of the top 3 guys in New York. He doesn't even treat anymore. He just travels. Well, he probably doesn't travel either, but he writes books. His name's Tom Bizio. I can share my book list later, but he fixed this injury. It took him about 3 or 4 months to work on it, and he fixed it to the point where I was back doing, downward dog and yoga and off to the races. And when he fixed it too, it was like this huge emotional release of all this, holding this thing that was so important to me for so long. And I was like, oh,
wow,
all of that. And that, so, not only did I have this master trumpet teacher, but I also had this master healer for my body. He was giving me exercises that were constantly expanding my capacity of just looseness and the opposite of the way I had played for so long. So I think that's what really led to a lot of very expedited growth in my time during that time. And I was playing with incredible musicians. I was in New York playing sessions pretty well, every day.
Wow. And so you mentioned, I know you've mentioned Bill Adam before. Who were you studying with that was an Adam student that was?
Well, that was upon my second return to New York after my visitation to lovely Vienna. I was there 2.5 years in Vienna, and I was able to really process again. I'm so lucky. All these times I had to really think about things and reflect on the beautiful knowledge and mentorship I had been given. When I returned to New York the second time, it was for good, because I had a record deal, and I was like, I got to be in the city. I got to play with people, and not that there aren't people in Austria. There just weren't people on the level of musicians in New York.
Right.
And so I came back, and I had a lot more together, and I had some tunes I'd written, had some music, but I also needed to, I needed to work too. And that was when Diva started. And that was a great opportunity. It was amazing. We worked a lot, and the caliber was super high. And Liesl was in the band, Liesl Whitaker.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. One of the best lead players in the world. And we became fast friends. And so she was teaching me, like, out of the chute. She's like, okay, let's get together and do routine. I'm like, what's routine? And she just kicked my ass, getting this big sound and doing all the lead pipe stuff. And she just gave me, it was full immersion into the routine, the Bill Adam routine that she had learned from him.
Right.
From Pat Harbison. And that was, I think because I was also still in my mindset of Lori and all of this subdivision stuff, that I was also, without even thinking about it, I was really starting to fuse a lot of these principles together, because they're all very similar. There's nothing that different when it comes to playing with efficiency.
Right.
Just how you decide to go about organizing it.
I remember hearing when I was in high school, I went to a music camp, and it was at Appalachian State, and Liesl was just transferring from there to Cincinnati, where she was with Pat. And I was, in high school, and I heard Liesl down the hall, And I thought,
Mhm.
what is that? What is that? Yeah, she was great when I was a kid, and I was trying to ask questions and stuff. But I guess I didn't realize you guys were. I mean, the diva connection I should have put together, but I didn't realize that was who was introducing you all that stuff. Yeah, she.
Oh yeah, it was great, and I think it really contributed to the sound of that
Pizza.
section. I'm okay, thanks, babe. My husband's offering me pizza. I'm not. I'm good. Um, yeah. So that section in that band too, I think because she was such a force, it really helped me to up my game to keep up with her sound. And it really, I'm just thinking about this now, it just hit me like it wasn't about playing all soft and pretty all the time. It was about having this whole huge palette that went all the way to fire. And she was just, she was just such a pal too. We had such camaraderie. I'd never had that with anybody before.
Yeah.
And I think the two of us were a little bit of a team there in lifting each other up, because it was so much fun. I mean, it was so fun. We laughed so hard. There were so many times when we were crying, we were laughing so hard. But then at the same time, it was serious. It was dead serious when it was time to hit.
Yeah.
But that was this is full circle. What led me to Lori the second time was, that's not Diva's fault, but there was a bus, and we were on a bus, and we had played a hard gig, and the bus broke down, and the air conditioning was on my face, and I woke up the next morning, and I had Bell's palsy.
Oh man.
Right here. And I looked at my mouth, and I tried to play. My whole face was, it was just like, that ain't gonna happen. You're done. Glad you enjoyed your run. You're done. And so I freaked out. I mean, I was like bawling, and I ran down to my Chinese doctor immediately. He's like, get your ass down here right now. And he really is a true master, and he knew exactly what to do. And he got things back to the place where within like, I don't know, a couple months, and between him and Lori, like that was the second person I called. But I first called Tom. I was like, Tom, you gotta save me. And then Lori, and that was a big rebuild. And you know the same thing, Mark. It's like when you get an injury, when you rebuild, you actually come back stronger,
right?
And with more awareness of things that
you didn't have to think about before.
Yeah, and also for me, it was very humbling as far as what I thought trumpet playing was about. I was like, oh, it's always been so natural and easy to pick it up and play. Maybe not like amazing, but it was all of a sudden I was like, wow, I really have to think about like the muscles and where is this coming? What's this contributing to? What's this doing? Oh, wait a minute, my shoulders have to be in the right place now too. It's really not about embouchure as much as it is about holistic being and air, and just air and corners and tongue.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam Rocker, for that
one. Well, and that was the next. So that's the next thing. I know you still work with Adam some, I'm guessing, but can you kind of talk?
Not so much now. I don't even know where he is. I can't keep up with that guy. I did see him at ITG in the last one in Miami, and we had a nice, happy reunion of sorts, even though they shut the bar too early.
Oh. What did he change in your playing? What was the next step with him?
I mean, that's a big fast forward, right? That's into my 40s when I was pregnant. I met Adam just before I got pregnant, I think. And he came over to my house. He was living in the store in Queens near me, very close. Right. So I don't know where we met the first time. I feel like it must have been in New York. I think it was in New York, maybe through Frank Green. He might have connected us. And so we just started, he came over and we just started shedding together. And I was like, I got to stop playing because the doctor says I shouldn't play because I'm pregnant. And he's like, whatever. And so you got to play better than ever. And, we met at Monette, of course. That's when we met, at the Monette shop. And so we just shedded together for a while. And then after I had my baby, he also helped me just really laid on these really great, very, very functional principles of playing that I still look back and I'm like, how did I not know that? It's so obvious.
Well, like what? What was, for example?
Trumpet face, this. That's all it is. It's not like we have to overthink anything here. There, put a horn on it. Play. that's I should have played yesterday. I think I recorded the day before in our studio really hard, but
Wow.
doesn't matter.
So were there like exercises he gave you, or was it just like
Oh,
just
totally.
yeah,
Lots of very very logical exercises, flexibility stuff, some timing stuff, and similar to Liesel, like he would challenge me to really up my game and play up to him, and that made me realize I had a lot more potential in me than I thought, as far as
yeah?
being like
Well, that's
a
one thing
musician.
about your playing. It never, even when you're playing really high, it doesn't seem like you're playing really high. You know, it seems like it's just in your range. It's in your natural range. It doesn't come across as like, oh, now I have to play high. It just seems like it makes
Because
sense.
you know what it is, Mark. I think I always heard those notes up there. I mean, that was one of my frustrations hearing Kenny Wheeler early on in my career. It's like, I love how he plays. Let me try to play like that. I quit. You know, like I didn't have the understanding of the physics of how to get there. And yet I was hearing it. Totally was hearing those notes.
Yeah.
So maybe, it's a vocal thing, even though my voice was kind of low and I wanted to play the trombone because I thought Jack Teagarden had the best sound ever. I think I still the trumpet now it is the expanded register of the keyboard.
Right.
I want to be up there down there and similar to saxophone have all this register to create with.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I wanted to talk about those guys a little bit, and also kind of now I want to talk about sort of your the teaching aspect of you right now, because you are the interim dean and director at Manhattan School of Music, as well as teaching at SUNY Purchase, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other places in the meantime. I think Michigan and a couple other.
No.
No. Where
That's
were the place in the past? Okay,
I'm updating my bio. Sorry about that. It's a
that's all
little,
right.
everything's a
Sorry
little.
about that.
I did teach there, and I taught at Peabody, and Peabody's like, Purchase is a comp class and couple of lessons.
Yeah.
So to balance that with what I'm doing now. Shh, hey, you guys, keep it down. Um,
What I was going to
sorry
say,
about that.
what do you notice about students now versus 20, 30 years ago? Do you notice any differences?
I think they're more burning now than ever. That's what's really blowing my mind. They seem to have, maybe because they have more access to more materials to learn and prepare with before they come to school. And
Right.
incredible. I mean, look at what's happening now. Even now it's faster than ever. There's so much information where you can actually see your person who you like on your instrument play, and then you can go, oh man, I see what they're doing. Like you and I, I grew
No,
up
no, no. There's no way. The internet,
imagining.
luckily, the internet came along after I was in college. So, and luckily, so did camera phones and
Yeah, right.
phones. Period. You know.
Yeah. A few videos of me are not totally embarrassing, but I'm glad a lot of them are not out there.
So
I
you
love
say
playing
they're more burning, and do you feel like they're more versed in players now, like the people
Yeah,
they're
I
going to?
think they have a broader palette of awareness of. I mean, if we just talk about the trumpet, right?
Yeah,
From Peter Evans to Louis Armstrong, it's really, for me it was like a big deal to check out Don Ellis, and now I mean that's like okay, that's cool too. But have you heard this guy play this thing? It's like wow, or this girl play with her electronics. There's a whole the instrument has taken on a life of its own, and because of the, this plethora of video and audio, mostly video, right? People
yeah,
really more video than ever. You can actually see what's happening.
right, right. And it's not just one thing. I mean, how many recordings of Miles playing "So What" did we not know about until the video came out later? You know,
Right?
that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You only
Yeah.
had one conception of that tune, and now that's not the truth. You know, that's not the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
What about, so you also go out, and when I had you come into school when I was teaching at the University of Akron to do that clinic, what kind of things do you notice? I would say for two things: for combos with students and for big bands? What kind of advice would you give? Like if a teacher's watching this and there were like a couple things with each of those scenarios that you just sort of always notice that you have to say something about.
Get your bells out of your stands. But really, we're talking teachers of younger.
Like kind of like if there's a high school jazz band and you're going to come in and play or something to that effect.
I'd
what?
say the most common thing I see, and I'm sure you see it too, is everyone has their slides way out here, so the physics of the instrument are fighting them, and they think they're sharp. And they're sharp because their air is going all over the place. And maybe their instrument is a bit wonky, but that alone is like defeating the cause and taking tons of sound and core energy away from what's happening. And as soon as they do some kind of a drone and sing that note and finally find the center of their pitch and the center of their, the angle of their air,
Right.
instead of going up or down and send things forward, I always have them use do the third eye thing and really imagine a stream of straight air. Now put that slide in a little more and see what happens. And a lot of them are like, whoa, it jumps, and they go to a higher note and then they're freaked out. So it's so sharp. No, you were just super flat, but playing sharp despite it all. It's a miracle how that happens. I did it for years.
Right. Right.
It's not a good miracle. It's a bad miracle.
You can't fight the physics and win in the long term.
And hand in hand with that is posture. Hand in hand. Most people that have their feet close together and their knees locked up, all they have to do is take the feet a little further apart, unlock their knees, and just soften their back and get the length in their necks, which, as you're seeing now, as a lot of us are seeing. Even my neighbor, his back is out right now because he's a computer guy. It's just this horrible, like, head over the body weight that's just taking away from all of the length of space that is available for our air.
And the more you talk about it, the more I try to say. So what about musically, as far as tendencies you notice with maybe rhythm sections or the way people articulate or anything like that that comes to mind or sticks out?
I mean, if people are learning, which they should be at this point, both orally and visually from people who are set up well with good posture and are playing with good time and good sound, it's like my daughter watching me play trumpet watching Adam play trumpet. She was under my arm while he was showing me how to play the trumpet. She picks up the horn. I swear she's got a bigger sound than anybody. She doesn't want to play the trumpet, but when she's like, "Oh, I'll be playing," she's like, "Let me play a few notes on that," and I'm like, "Damn, snap! How do you do that?"
Wow.
Like, no second thoughts whatsoever of what it entails to have a perfect setup and just like hoist effortless energy through the instrument.
Wow. Is she going to do it?
This was from since when she was 2. She played a blues on the trumpet when she was 2 without any valves. I'm like, how did you do that? I was watching Adam for a month and a half of my most formative years, just looking at him going, oh yeah, okay, that's how you do that. Cool. So, I mean, what we see and what we take in through our eyes and our ears and our body, if we're not messing it up in the process, I think it's a much better way than learning from a real book or learning from paper. So that's another piece of advice too, is get the anxiety paper out of the way and start from just sounds and a groove and a pulse and playing along with something till you have the feel. Play along with Jimmy Cobb on Ready Freeloader till you have a feel. And once that feel starts to come into play, well, from just the ride cymbal, and the bass player can start playing some half notes and some quarter notes and start walking. And it'll all unfold organically, but it'll be still, from each individual.
Yeah.
From their core. As far as comping, you don't comp because there's comping patterns in a book. You comp on the piano in relation to what's happening around you. It's a response. Where does this need to go? Okay, that was a good spot. That felt good. I'll do something similar but different next time. And then when the horn player starts to solo, to feel where the interaction can begin, so that it's not a solo.
Right.
To try to avoid the pressure of a solo early on, I think, is another way to really get to the core of making music.
Okay. So you're saying like the stress of having the solo is kind of maybe at a certain age getting in the way of just basic music making for them.
Right. I worked with Melissa Gardner, great trombone player. She's amazing. She's on Ellen Rose project, and she blew my mind up in Syracuse. She had all these kids. They were like, I think they were like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids playing this New Orleans brass band music, and she just taught them simple riffs, had them move their bodies to it. And man, these kids, you're gonna have no problem adapting to playing giant steps in 7.
Wow.
No problem. They'll be able to really, they already were improvising over just 2 or 3 notes. So that's another thing to be careful of. It's like, we always teach them the blues scale. Why don't teach them the blues scale? Have them listen to Blind Lemon Jefferson and just, to try and describe what they heard and then try to play that.
Right. Right. So do you, and what about student? I mean, did you ever go through a big transcription period when you were a student?
Yeah, I have books of transcriptions, but not heaps, not copious amounts, because there was a certain point I got to where I was like, I'm not going to write it all down. I'm just going to keep playing it so I can get to the next one. And I learn this solo, learn that solo, or learn a tune accurately. If it's something more complex, like the Coltrane solos, I wrote them all out because I wanted to see what they look like, and then I wanted to move the octaves so I could actually execute them. Freddie Hubbard solo on Bird, like, this is like, I just want to write this out. This is like a marathon. Let me write this whole thing out and see if I can play through it from beginning to end, and then really stop and kind of circle spots that I keep getting hung up on and ask myself why, because I'm not hearing here. So that's the beauty of transcription, is to really shine a light on the aspects of my technique that needs work, not so much the licks I want to rip off.
Now, in speaking of things that you don't hear, I mean, do you still find yourself singing patterns and singing things and imitating that as much as maybe when you were a student?
I never did patterns because, you're talking to me. This is the ADD brain of Ingrid Jensen that fortunately wasn't medicated to death by any kind of system.
Yeah.
So that was me doing the Clark study, right? That's how I started out doing Clark studies. Maybe it doesn't sound that clean, that good, but to constantly be manipulating every element in my toolbox so that I can build something different every time is my goal. Wow. Patterns got in the way of that. I couldn't memorize licks. I couldn't remember, and I think that's the gift of being left-handed. Is I was playing with an uncoordinated hand that was like, yeah, sorry, you can't just dial that idea in. You better be original. You better find your own way through this. Oh. And so,
so I just kind of
handicaps.
Oh, I don't think you have any handicaps now.
Oh, thank you.
I think you've gotten past them. So, I just had and you have a couple new projects coming out. Artemis, it's a new group you're in, right? A fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit, that group, and what's the makeup of that?
That is a super group of leaders on their instruments. Manat Cohen on clarinet, Melissa Aldana, although she's not long with the band anymore. We have Nicole Glover, who's a fantastic tenor player. Allison Miller, if you haven't heard of her music is incredible. Rini Rosnes is our artistic director, and Noriko Ueda, Japanese bass player.
Yeah.
She writes so great. And just plays fantastic. And Cecile McLaurin-Salvant is on the record on 2 tunes. We did a tour. It just happened, a promoter put together a band of all women, and then it evolved into an actual real band of all humans who happen to be women.
And so this new album drops on like September 11th, I think. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know why Blue Note chose that date, but I think it's maybe. I mean, I'm looking at it optimistically. Like, it's a sad day, but there's one happy thing that will happen. It's a very big reflective day, but it's also a very important day for things to move forward.
Yeah.
And Yeah, it's a powerful record because we're all contributing music. Some of it, in this case of my tune, "Fool on the Hill," um, a little political. Hopefully that goes okay.
Well, I won't keep you forever tonight, but I guess I wanted to ask you two other questions. The first, if you had 5 desert island recordings to recommend to somebody, including one of your own, what would they be?
Ooh, ooh. Well, I have to. I mean, I defer to. I find I defer to my recording called "At Sea" a lot, just because of the very first tune, which really makes me. It puts me in the place that I was in when I was in Alaska when I wrote the tune, but also in a very expansive place beyond that. Every time I hear it, I'm like, well, I hope everyone else has the same experience. So every time I hear this, it's not a very long tune. It's like 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Not even that. And it's one of those, it's a sketch. It's like a real sketch. There's nothing, if you look at if I shared the lead sheet, you'd be like, what? How did you do that, you guys? Like 8 bars of music was written down. So, yeah.
Well, in that record, I find that recording interesting because what I always noticed, I mean, before we went on Facebook Live, I was talking to you about that you never sound the same. And it seems like you seem completely at home playing straight ahead bebop, or you seem completely at home doing stuff like At Sea, which to my ear was more like a kind of a soundscape situation with some.
Yeah.
And then
But then the third tune is like Jeff Keezer. It's like a Latin mambo burnout.
Yeah, and then with the electronic stuff, all the electronics and the funk, all that stuff, all that seems like it's in your wheelhouse. So it doesn't seem like you're not going to be pigeonholed, I would say.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's a pleasure and an honor to be surrounded by musicians who encourage all of my crazy ideas. Up until yesterday, the thing we recorded this weekend was Rhodes, guitar, drums, and trumpet, no bass, and we made so much music in an hour together. That's going to be on Saturday, by the way.
On Facebook Live, right?
I think it's through the Vortex Jazz Club. We rescheduled it because the live stream didn't work, so we ended up recording it. But back to the 5 records. I would also say the electronica part, which came out of doing At Sea, which was, I didn't use any electronics. I just used the technology to layer sounds, but it opened the whole Pandora's box into what I do now, which is a lot of live looping and different textures that create, that actually help me to play in a different way. They inspire me to maybe almost be like a guitar player or a kind of guitar trumpet fusion thing sometimes, or a seagull or a cloud. It's like a whole spectrum of things that those soundscape things can unveil if they're in context with the music,
right?
So and in relation to the music, they can't just be random. That never appealed to me. So the whole electronic thing really unfolded in a very, I hate to use the word again, but it really was. It was like completely unplanned. It was actually after doing the Pretty Road on Maria Schneider's record when I was like, how am I gonna recreate this live? Now I have to get my live setup together. Oh my gosh, that was a whole learning curve. Reminds me of right now the learning curve I'm in with Logic and learning video editing. But Miles Davis, what's it called? I have to look in my iTunes. I'm forgetting because my brain has been going all day. Not On the Corner, but come here, Ingrid. Where is it? That would be one. Miles is, his 60s rock band stuff is great. It's there it is. Not live at the Fillmore, but Cellar Door series.
Can you see the Miles picture behind me, by the way?
I do. That's really good.
I saw him when I was in high school, and I had no idea what was happening, and didn't appreciate it till years later. It was the whole electronic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw Miles a few times in Vancouver, a couple times, and it wasn't what I was expecting either, Mark. I was like, what happened to his hair? And what are those clothes he's wearing? Where's his suit?
That's
huh? Right. I was so naive, and my friends were laughing at me. They're like, come on, Ingrid. didn't even hear
When's he
it.
gonna play Someday My Prince Will Come?
Yeah, we're gonna play time after time. I'm like, that's it. That's the closest he's gonna get to jazz. Okay, but then he had won me over.
So you got three more records.
Ooh, that's a tough one. You know, does it have to be jazz?
Not necessarily. Nope.
Well, then I have to have a Joni Mitchell in there because every time I say Joni Mitchell, it includes Wayne Shorter, so that gets another one out of the way. Joni Mitchell, what is it called? It's not here. Could be anything, but it's the Both Sides Now, the one that is with Vince Mendoza, a double album. It's called Both Sides Now. Just put Joni Mitchell, Vince Mendoza. That's Endless Beauty. Two more, huh?
Two more.
You know, it's kind of funny. I have to say, I don't listen to a lot of music now. When I work, I listen to music that is designed to keep my brain focused.
Right.
It's called brain spotting music, and it's really not music. It's not. They don't call it brain spotting music. It's called brain spotting, and it's actually these kind of massage waves that really help. They're really interesting. I'm going to say Stevie Wonder.
Okay.
I'm going to have Stevie in there. I'll just say, let's see, Superstition. Yeah, just Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder. That was the name of the record. I think it was the one that has Irish on it.
Right.
Yeah. And let's see. One more. Sorry. Oh gosh, one more. This is so hard. I'm gonna just throw one out there, like Hinastera.
Okay.
But I can't remember the name of the record. Do you know which one I might be talking about? There's this Hinastera that just every time I hear it, it's so incredible.
I only know like two Hinastera pieces. I'm embarrassed to say. Well, yeah. Very well.
But let's just put something in there that's along the lines of.
Well, okay. Let's say it was one more jazz album that you were trying to tell a high school kid you really got.
Tell a high school kid.
Let's do that.
That's hard. Now we need 10. I mean, gotta have some Louis. Gotta have some definitely Miles. Kind of Blue because it's accessible.
Yeah.
Some Fun Being Morgan so you can relate to hip hop and all that stuff or Horace Silver.
Yeah.
Duke Ellington's essential because Duke Ellington was counterpoint and highest level music possible. Yeah. And then you get access to Clark Terry and Sweets and all those. Oh, not Sweets. Clark Terry and Snooki and all those great musicians. And then you want to hear Batesy anyways because you heard Duke Ellington. And then fast forward, I would just say Gil Evans opens also the box, Pandora's box, to all of this massive amount of very great soloists, but really integrated in through composed sounds.
Right.
That relate to so many platforms that we're working in today. And I find Gil Evans' music to be timeless.
Yeah.
You can put on any of those records and just go, what? How is that possible? That was in 1960.
Yeah. And I guess the last question I have for you, and this is sort of might be a little deep, but what obviously the COVID thing this is such a weird time. So, being an optimist, because we all talk to our friends who are other musicians, and there's a lot of doubt or insecurity about, will this come back? How will it come back? What's it going to look like? And there's just a lot of pessimism. I don't see you as a real pessimistic person. So where do you see it, in an optimistic kind of way? What do you think can evolve out of this that's maybe good that you thought
of? I think, I definitely am an optimist, but I'm an optimist for some, for good reason. I got a dog. Yeah. Never thought I'd have a dog. We're the family least likely to ever have a dog. I mean, it really did slow us all down to a point where, I mean, come on, social justice is long overdue, would not be being reflected upon in the way it is now. had we been so busy. Just stop and like everybody should just stop right now and think about that item alone, or gender justice. Those two issues that are so behind the times and affect so much what we do on a day-to-day basis. Me particularly, as a woman in a non-traditional field, I could go on about things that I probably should have been more concerned about, but I was too busy playing. I was
Right.
too busy running around packing bags and being a mom and doing all the things that you do in life. And now that I stop and look at it, I'm like, man, I don't know anything about this. I have to really get to work and read and listen to podcasts and talk to my white friends about things we didn't talk about before because we were too embarrassed, or we were just too ignorant, or too, whatever, too, ta ta ta, too, ta ta ta. And then that's a fine excuse. I'm busy with my stuff, man. But were we really that busy, or did we allow a system to just completely take control of our lives and continue to feed that system with everything we produce? So that's where my optimism lies, in reshaping what we've been doing up until now with all of this incredible wealth and privilege of education alone. Just educate, just having you to talk to about Trump. Hey man, what should I practice today? Well, I'm not just throw something random at a student. You're gonna go, what are you working on? What are you into? Let me hear you play.
Yeah.
And now, I think we all have to add to that, the value of music and the value of what we do, and how that really does affect the population. It really does.
Yeah.
This is not just some random noise we're making here and there. This is everything that's coming out of me now. Everything since COVID that has come out of me as a musician has been way more meaningful. And I started by playing out the window, playing taps and playing Amazing Grace and Somewhere Over the Rainbow through all keys eventually, because I got so sick of it. And then what I saw was community start to unfold, because I was not afraid to stick my bell out the window, and people started to tell me how much it meant to them every day at 7 o'clock. And then religiously showing up. Like there was this family would every day they're there at 7. Like, when are you gonna play? Why aren't you playing? You better play. And so that turned into playing concerts in our front yard. My husband and I would play duo. We'd have a whole band. And this is 3 months of just reflecting, and all these things are going by, right? The riots and so-called riots, the protests, the beautiful protests, the beautiful work that's being done. And as well as all of this gender justice. AOC speech recently, my goodness, we can actually sit and reflect on that. That will actually get listened to in this time. I don't totally believe we would have been able to digest a lot of what's going on that is so crucial had this not happened. So to make some smoke and lemonade out of it is our only option.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll get like a little squeeze and put it on my salad. It's like, no, we're going to make the most incredible vitamin C to save our future for our children and to create a way better world. And that's not just naive Canadian optimism. Well, I can jump out of here anytime. No, I'm in it.
Yeah.
I'm in it. And I have the luxury to be in it on a level that gives me a platform and the foundation of sharing what I can share. And I just think that all of us should really re-examine what we have available to contribute and how that can really go further into community and create a society that is using music in the way and utilizing music in the way that I felt by watching these people who were scared crapless to come out of their house, like come out and just sit and listen and go,
Yeah. It is important, right? It is important. And
it's not important. It's essential.
It's essential. Yeah.
Music is in our core of our very being. It's not something, oh, I'm a musician, yeah, check me out, I'm an artist. No, it's like it is in the core. It's essential to what people need to survive with, which again, I'll leave with this, since we're running low on time and I gotta go and you gotta go. But
I can be here all night, but it sounds like you're probably
people are like, what? She had to stop.
By the way, and before you say that, there's so many people watching. Liesel's watching, by the way.
Donnie,
Yeah,
come here, I want to show Liesel Donnie.
Arden Butcher, you probably know. Ryan Chapman, Jose Cibaja. I could read names and names and names of people. BJ Cord, I'm sure you know BJ. And
BJ's
Taylor
looking at
Argan.
my piece and going, why is she using the hack one? It's the one I practice on, BJ. I don't want to drop the good one.
So if there's some great people, just Russ Devis is talking about how he had shingles
Oof.
and he paralyzes. I mean, there's so many people writing that wanted to check you out. So I'm apologizing to all of them because I'm not a good multitasker when I'm really talking to somebody. So,
No, you do your
but if I didn't get to your
great, Mark,
question,
by the way.
you know,
Thanks for hosting me.
oh my gosh, I mean, there's just so many people that have commented on here that are big fans of yours. So I'm really happy to see that. Especially happy to see Liesl popped in. So, um,
Just
so
doing crime.
I, I don't know if she heard all the stuff we were saying about her earlier. I'm not sure when she chimed
It was all good. I promise, Lisa. I didn't tell some of the most embarrassing stories, which were always my fault.
in. But I interrupted you. But yeah, absolutely. This is a time of like reflection and listening. And I know for me, like I have to really, if I'm stressed out about the situation, I really do listen to music in a little bit different way. It is a bit calmer. It is more, like you said, essential. Like you need this. It's just like eating healthy,
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to tell a freshman going into university, it's all going to be okay. Or a graduating senior, you're going to be fine. So this is the part where I think actually we have to work harder. I mean, we spoke a little bit about how I'm running a program right now. And what I'm taxing my brain cells on mostly right now is figuring out ways to reshape the curriculum in a way where a student can see the possibilities that we are already kind of taking advantage of, but also have not put the time in on enough. I don't know if that makes sense. Going from video to audio to having all the control over the business. There's a lot of autonomy was the big word of our meetings today. And I really am with the autonomy things. Like if we can have, within that is where this systemic mistake and tragedy that this country is living in is going to slowly get itself out of trouble and get to a healthier place. But there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of along the way. Mental health is one of them. Privilege. That pops up to the front of my mind when I say that. Oh yeah, I had an accident. I need some help. Well, if you don't have money, you're not going to get that help. So it's all about it's about finding that balance. And for people to think that I said there was that list. I saw that. You probably saw it. It was like all the essential workers, all the essential, and the very, very bottom people that are going to come out of this at the end of COVID that are the least important. And it was like musicians and artists. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
You know what? If we fool ourselves into believing that that's true, then the man has won. And it's really so not true. It's actually the opposite, because what we are able to provide for ourselves in our own private time, in writing, in practicing, and sharing with each other and teaching, is healing. It moves things forward. It creates possible possibilities that are positive possibilities, and B, it also is truly a service on a broader spectrum. You don't even know how it's going to affect someone else.
Right.
These neighbors of mine, they heard me practice for years. I thought they hated me, and they're just like, that was so beautiful. We were crying. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just tried to play some songs that were relevant to the moment. It's Passover. I called my student. He taught me some traditional Jewish melodies I didn't know, and so that part of the community and the expansive nature of what we are already involved with that we've totally taken for granted. I think I have. I won't speak for everyone, but I have. I was just like, oh yeah, we'll just go play with each other and do this and that. It's like now it's like.
Well, it's sort of like I'm sure you've seen this on YouTube before or something, when they show like a clip from a movie with no music.
Yeah.
Like if you watch Star Wars with no music, it's ridiculous, right?
Oh yeah, good point.
And I think that no matter what your maybe more specific genres, if it's jazz or if you're a classical musician or if you're a rock musician or whatever it is, I mean, it's like you're right. There's no time left to just take it for granted and we're doing it for art's sake, right? When we have to be a little more entrepreneurial mindset, we got to stop thinking that we are not essential. like you said.
Yeah. And on the other hand, we also have to do the work so that what we are doing is not so exclusive and is more inclusive.
Yeah.
There is this long overdue on so many platforms, and that's where the business of music comes into it for me as a professor this year, as leading the youth. It's like, you got to take ownership of your value, and let's stop throwing things around for free, because the internet came along and just like puked all over our business. It just
Oh yeah.
sucked it all out of us. You know, it's like, gig, 70% of what you're going to do to make your money is supposed to be live gigs. Well, that's gone. Now what? Okay, yes, I can see why people freak out and get dark. Absolutely. That's a natural human response. But you either fight or you flight. You fight or you flee.
Yeah.
And I think that for us, especially us of privileged nature, to flee is it's a little weak.
Yeah.
It shows that whatever was there as far as foundation was probably not that solid in the first place. Be that friendships, be that musical appreciation and depth of character in relation to what it is you're doing. So yeah, we've got so many resources.
So what kind of changes or ideas are you having in your position in Manhattan to sort of incorporate what we're going through into the curriculum?
Those are secrets. No, I'm kidding. You know, we're all working together on this. I think everybody, there's a lot of conservatories and schools around the world that are all in a similar situation. But you know, first of all, the thing we're doing is using this technology to be in touch and share ideas in ways that I don't think faculties have done as much as they're doing now. The conversation is much more focused and there's actually an outcome, and not everything happens that you want it to happen. I'm not going to be idealistic in this situation, but I'm seeing how meeting with certain faculty members who are very savvy about business and recording arts, how valuable that's going to be and how easy it's going to be to transfer that information to the students.
It's also really, do you think it's brought out the need for, we have to be able to speak about our music. In the past that wasn't an issue. You didn't have to speak, right? And now you have to.
The presentation is even something now, right?
Yeah, you have to be an ambassador, right?
Yep, and you have to have your lighting together. My lighting's not really good in here, but you have to, you have to also just really think about what it is you want to put out there, because now also, as you probably are aware, and many people watching this are aware, the market is flooded with everybody and their dog playing Clifford Brown transcriptions on Instagram. How many of those can we watch? But really, nothing against those of you who are transcribing Clifford. It's fantastic. But where is, where's the mentorship that will help to also filter the meaning into these presentations that were similar to when Dexter Gordon went in the studio and did a record, because he was Dexter Gordon, because he had a band with Woody Shaw, and they went in and did 2 takes, and both of them were killing. And how they decide which one to use, I don't know. It fit the contour of the record and the storyline and the artist's vision and the liner notes and the photography. So there's so many, and this is where, to answer your question a little better is, we're trying to really cross-platform more than ever, quit being snobs in our departments and hoarding all of our goodies. It's like, let's start sharing some of these things that were meant to be shared,
right?
And that will inspire each other's growth and really create some actual legacy content.
Yeah,
you ain't gonna get a reputation going to a jam session these days.
No. In your West End Blues challenge that you did on Facebook 6 months ago, everybody's already forgotten about that, right?
They forgot about it as they were scrolling by to see what other cool stuff they could find. My character here.
So anyway, Ingrid, I just want to say thanks again. And to all those people who were watching, I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions.
You can ask me another one. Come on, let me plug in.
All right, I'll ask you another one. Another question for you. Okay. Going back to the albums.
Yes.
5 jazz records, not including one of your own, and why? but the specific record.
The specific record. Okay. Well, I'm going to pull out one. There's one. Mel Lewis and Friends.
Okay.
Why? Because every song on here is great. Because Thad Jones is involved in it. Yeah. And Ron Carter's on it. And Freddie Hubbard. No, Thad Jones isn't on this. This is that one with the small group stuff where the child is born and Mooch the Mooch. That was definitely a record that when I heard Freddie playing with Mel Lewis, it put together the big band and the small group worlds that I grew up in.
Right.
I just didn't get it until I heard them play together. And because I'd grown up with someone Sweet for Pops, Mel Lewis, which to me was a celebration, but it was a big band. I was like, how do you get that feeling in a small group? So that's an answer to one of your questions.
Okay.
Okay. What else is hanging
One
out?
more.
Four more. I don't know if I can do four. And if I have to, you should have told me this in advance. This is a hard one.
It's spontaneous.
Okay, here's a spontaneous one. I'm just going to take CDs off my CD shelf. There's a good one.
The Shape of Things to Come. Yeah, that's a great record.
Ornette Coleman. We were doing these last two sessions I did. I've been learning Ornette. One of the things I've had time to do, actually, which I never have time to do before. Not that I have time right now, I'm very busy, but in my practice time to focus on taking a tune through as many keys available, so all 12 keys, and then meters and tempos. So we've been doing I'm doing round trip on almost all these sessions. I've done the last two, and we played it a lot in the front yard, and I was like, man, you can just take an Ornette tune and play for an hour if you've been developing vocabulary and keeping the flow going. As soon as I find myself repeating ideas or being redundant and licky, I know that it's time to revisit that way of practicing as well.
That's interesting.
And to dig in deeper with the drone and honestly to put myself in a situation where I'm constantly in unfamiliar territory.
Yeah. Right.
That's Ornette
I learned about Ornette Coleman in high school in Miles's autobiography because there's a picture of Ornette playing trumpet and Miles giving a lot of flowery language around his trumpet playing.
Ah.
So
yeah.
But it made me curious, right? So it's good to listen to it.
Yeah.
All right. Give me
Clark Terry. Anything Clark Terry, but I would say Clark Terry and Oscar Peterson.
Yeah.
If I could play it, share a screen and play that right now, I would play anything from those Pablo records of those guys together. They were magical.
Yeah. Did you stay in touch with Clark for a long time after?
Yeah, I talked to him, I think, a week before he passed.
Yeah.
He called me while I was driving with my child in the car, and I was like, really, you want to talk to Clark Terry while I don't crash the car because I'm so sad? But yeah, he was, without Clark, I don't know where I would be. I think a lot of people say that.
I think a lot of people, yeah.
Who else is in my room here? Let's see. How many more?
You got three more. Make one of them a hard bop record.
Hard bop. Well, that's Clifford First and Last. That was a record I wore out for sure, and cried too. I remember putting it on. I was like, why am I crying? This is like fast bebop. And I think I was reading the liner notes and getting to really a real perspective on this difficult life that so many Black musicians had to deal with. I was reading a lot of jazz books around at that time, and then I was reading about his tragic end and listening to the beginning to the end. I was like, wow. Does that mean if you practice, you don't get to live past 25, 23? So that was a big one. Hi, do you want to say hi? Hi. What's going on? This is a Zoom. You're looking, okay. This is Fred and Alex. All right, we're almost done. We're wrapping up. I'll talk to you
But
soon, okay?
where's that mattress out? Where's camping?
I will get it for you in just a minute. You give me 5 more minutes?
No.
Yeah, you have to.
Fine.
You can tell that the listening skills at our house are going really well.
Why did I call you dog? That's so weird.
Are they still in the back there?
Yeah.
Ask them.
Camping.
Oh,
Camping.
we got a question, guys.
Ask them if they know how mermaids wash their fins.
What?
How do mermaids wash their fins?
I never really watched this one. They
Tide.
Tide.
I never heard that one, but that's a good one.
That was a good one. Wow, man, good one on the jokes. The bad dad jokes.
I've got 6 of them.
I got to work on my bad mom jokes. Oh, you know what? I'm looking at another record that I think is people sleep on, and this is, because being a West Coaster, there was a lot of music from the West Coast that influenced me. And when I met Bob, oh shoot, what's his last name? Bob, the big band writer, Bob Florence.
Oh.
Florence. The heat's starting to get to my brain. We played together, and it was another thing, an ism that we have to be careful of right now is ageism, and I feel that is something we don't talk enough about as far as in this music, because that's one of the beauties of Artemis is that we have someone from almost every generation right now. We have the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, and the 60s year olds. Not this generation. We have this whole gamut of age, and it's something magical to have so many people from so many different perspectives of the way this music has been translated, and also international people too. It's a very international band. That's another luxury. But when I played with Bob Florence, he was playing piano. And if you don't know Bob Florence's piano playing or big band writing, you're missing out. And I was like, who is this dude? He's like hunched over on the piano. I wonder if he's going to be able to hang. I want to play with my friends. We're going to hit hard and play really fast. And my friend Alan Jones, he's the same thing. We both had the same feeling. We're like, oh man, they paired us, at this jazz camp. They paired us to play a faculty concert with this guy. Who's he? And boy, did we learn quickly how ignorant we were, because he just laid down like one chord and we almost fell off the stage. It's such a beautiful sound and harmonic touch. So his solo piano records are probably some of my favorite desert island records.
I just wrote that down.
Florence solo piano. There's one where he plays. Oh, what's up, Donnie? Come here. Come and say hi. We'll say hi and bye to everybody soon.
Oh, hey, somebody
I
just.
know it's bad Zoom etiquette to bring a dog on, but we gotta bring dog.
Perfect Zoom etiquette. Somebody just wrote, and maybe this is a good way to close it. What's a favorite Louis Armstrong record?
Oh, I just did this because I was asked to be part of a little Louis Armstrong video that reminded me of my favorite one, and it's called it's Louis Armstrong. I Come From a Musical Family is the tune, and the record is called oh darn it, where did I put it? Oh, it was right here. Louis Armstrong, yeah, the Verve Silver Collection. That's the one. It's on this record, and there's a whole bunch of them. But just put in Louis Armstrong, I Come From a Musical Family, and it is from his time when it was the Hot Fives and in the early times, but it's also such a contemporary sounding piece of music.
Yeah. It is amazing how contemporary so much of that music still is,
Timeless, absolutely timeless. Totally, just incredibly timeless. So,
what's the dog's name, by the way?
The dog's name is Donnie.
Nice.
Donnie the dog. He's pretty chill. He likes trumpet.
Does he sleep right through your practicing?
Yeah. Let's say goodbye. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks everybody for watching. Ingrid, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you everybody for showing up. Liesl and all, if you're still here.
And I hope I see you in person again sometime after all this is done.
I want to hear you. I want to hear you in person too. But just keep doing what you're doing with all your recordings and everything. It's lovely.
Thank you. Good. Thanks, and keep doing your outdoor concerts, because I know that means quite a bit to everybody around you.
a little hot right now, but we're gonna break them back. We'll break out again when it gets back below 85.
I'm just gonna play Clark studies for my neighbors.
You know, jam on them, make them Phrygian, and turn them into a 7/4 vamp. They'll never know.
They'll go a lot slower that way.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Thanks to
Ingrid.
everybody
Great to
showing
see
up.
you. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.